Good evening, everyone. Ngithembe ukuthi you are well and isaphila emakhaya. I trust that you had a wonderful weekend, in spite of everything that is happening. Sinbingelele nonke, and welcome to Streams Online. It is an online-based ministry that tackles issues, social issues, religious issues, and of course, we open the Sabbath together. I am your host, Ayanda Mbata. Some they call me Umfundisi, Mabetanda. But anyways, we thank God that you are here and you've joined us today. Just to remind us, Uguti, we live in this world, the COVID world. That one thing, life is not one thing. And most importantly, this reality has become our reality and it will be our reality for some time to come. But nonetheless, we are going to be hopeful. Sizo lokhe nje siphambana ngehope, because we cannot live and be disoriented and accept that this is irreality yet. Somehow, somewhere, we have to make it work. And so we are going to be meeting. We meet every week, on Tuesdays, on Thursdays, and Fridays at 6 p.m. As you know, this month of August, it is our Women's Month. The whole of South Africa is celebrating Women's Month. And so on our Tuesday social issues, we will have women who will be speaking on various issues. Some they'll be speaking on health issues. Next week, though, we will have people who will be speaking on the IT. I know information technology, iyasijibula as abazalwane. So we'll have women who work in that industry. One, she is a business owner, in IT, and the other one, she works in IT. She is a PhD candidate in IT. So it's going to be a fascinating encounter next week, same time at 6 p.m. on Tuesday. Please, we have a YouTube channel. Let's subscribe to it and follow it. Be more interactive for our future programs. As we mentioned last week, Uguti, we will have a feel good corner. A feel good corner, it is a place where we check out stories that are positive, that have happened during the lockdown, during this COVID world. And there've been things that have been happening. You'll be mind blown, actually, if you go on the internet and check what is happening, on the internet, and what people have been doing, and monama achievements, and of course, in training, they have been put on stop, like graduations, they haven't been able to happen, so but they've been happening virtually. But they have been good things which are happening. And our feel good story, it comes all the way from Limpopo. I hope I got it right. Limpopo. It is about a guy, a 35-year-old guy who was once a petrol attendant, and now he is an admitted attorney of the High Court. He was admitted at the court last Monday, that is last week, and after currently finishing his LLM at the University of Venda. His name is Mbavelo Mbati. I think I've got it right. Mbabelo, yes, because it's VH. So that's a B. Yeah, that's Mbabelo Mbati. And because he was working as a petrol attendant, but he realized that he had a passion for the law. And he was working at a petrol station in Brits. Having realized this passion, um, and through being after being appointed by his colleagues at the petrol station to be a shop steward, and he was already married, he needed to support his family, but still he applied at the University of Venda, and they accepted him, and he started studying law. You can imagine. Despite much challenges that you can imagine that he was facing, as we know, the petrol attendants don't earn much, and also he was faced with the tragedy of his family where his father passed away. So, which means he had to even be financially compromised, but still he persevered, even though he was the only sole breadwinner at the family. He still pursued with his academic aspirations and their marriage, and also his wife was also studying, and but still they kept on, pushing. They were doing piece jobs here and there. Some they were sewing clothes, and he persevered until he graduated with over 20 distinctions 4 years later. And today, last week, he was um, admitted as a candidate attorney at the Wits Law Clinic, where he works alongside the director of Wits School of Law, that is Dave and Das. So there are positive things happening, and there's a quotation that he has. He says he wants to advocate for the people with similar backgrounds, and even though he celebrates, he understands that there's still much to be done. So what we find with this story, ladies and gentlemen, is that anything is possible. We should not be led to believe that we cannot do it. We can do it even at home. We just need a willing heart to be able to do all that we can in order to achieve much. So that is our feel good story for this week. And it actually coincided with what we'll be talking about today. We got a feel good lawyer story because today we are going to be talking about the law. So, as you saw the posters, our guest for this evening, we are going to be talking to Mrs. Lesego Mazibuko. She is not a a new person to our channel. She used to live here in Newcastle, and then work has taken her away from us. Now she's in Centurion, Pretoria, where she is working there. But of course, we looked into this thing. We know Lesego. She is a very prolific speaker. I've always enjoyed her public speaking. I've also enjoyed just engaging with her on many issues, church issues, social issues, church politics. It's always a delight to speak with her. But today, we are going to talk about the law. Now, we are not going to be specific, but if you have questions regarding the law, guys, you can use the chat if you want to engage. Ulisejo, she's more than willing to be engaged and to be part of the program. We know that here in South Africa, the law becomes a very murky issue. Once you talk the law, it's either you've done something, but actually, the law is a very broad discipline of which she will help us navigate through it so that siwazi amalungelo ethu, so that as a citizen of this country, you know what your rights are, what you are entitled to, where can you go to seek help, even if ungenamali, but still you have a right of a representation. So tonight we will be talking about the law. So please, without any further ado, please welcome Lesego Mazibuko. You can unmute yourself, Lesego. Yes, she's unmuted herself. So
Hi,
welcome, Lesego. Hello, good evening. How are you
thank
doing?
you. Good evening to everybody. I'm fine, thank you.
All right. It's good to have you. It's good to see you again. I think the last time we saw you on Zoom, it was beginning of lockdown. How, before we get into this thing, how has lockdown been on your side, the neck of the woods?
Hey, it's been hectic. As you all know, Tina like Godly, we are in Wuhan. So yeah, infections are very high, but unfortunately, post life has to go on. Smele sibuyele emsebenzini. Initially, we did not go to work when it was level 5 and then slightly level 4. So we are slowly going back. But you know what? Life as we know it has changed and post life has to go on. Impilo iyaqhubeka,
Mm.
abantu bayaqhubeka bayasebenza, even in the midst of that. So
Oh,
it's a bit scary to walk around, you're afraid to even touch anything. If I could have it my way, bengizohlala nje ngifake ama-gloves, but okay, that seems just
yeah.
scary. But yeah, we are coping by God's grace. We are still here
Oh, yeah.
and
No,
making the
that's
most of it.
beautiful.
The sad thing
So
is, I've got friends who've lost their jobs. Some have had to take pay cuts, and life has just become extremely difficult, I must say.
mm,
It
yeah, I can
has.
imagine. I can
Mm.
imagine. So how has the transition been? It's been a couple of months since you've left us. How has it transition in the midst of everything that is happening? How's life over there?
Oh,
Of
there's no
in
place
the work.
like there's no place like home. Yabona ekhaya noma ngathi akwenze njani nje ngisho kusendlaleni kuhlusha but ekhaya kusekhaya. So it's been awesome to be home with my family. I had been missing them terribly. Though I must say, ngiyanikhumbula nani terribly. So I miss Newcastle a lot. But it's been quite lovely to be back home, and lockdown has given us some time to spend time together because ngithe ngifika nje ngafikela phezu komsebenzi and I was exhausted. But ngenxenye lockdown has allowed me to rest quite a bit to sort of transition into my work, nicely. So yeah, it's been
Mm,
awesome.
all right. No, no, let's get into it. So the thing is, the legal fraternity is very broad. You know,
Yes.
um, we have criminal, commercial, media, etc. And also South Africa being a constitutional democracy, that is what we are told. So how important is it for citizens and even residents, because we have citizens and residents here in South Africa, people on a permanent residence, to know the constitution? How important is for people to know the constitution?
It's very important, Mfundisi. It's extremely important. One thing about South Africa, we've got one of the most comprehensive constitutions. And other countries look at our constitution and they are like, you know what, this constitution is the most comprehensive. Yes, it's a bit liberal, but it's got a lot of Christian elements to it if you look at our rights. So it's important because everything you do, konke la uhamba khona, somehow eh, everything touches on your rights. And to be honest, the constitution is not as it's not as complicated and as difficult to understand as people sometimes think is.
Mm,
Yes, there are references back and forth, and it's easier for some of us to read and reference. But if we take the time to read it, specifically the fundamental rights, the Bill of Rights, that is
mm,
extremely important. Okay, if you don't read anything else, at least chapter 2, the Bill of Rights, read it. It's very important. Emsebenzini, you will revoke your rights. At school, you will revoke your rights. Everywhere you go, it's all about your rights. So it's very important that we
mm,
familiarize ourselves with the Constitution.
mm. Yeah, because it seems like, when we talk to someone who either been let go at work, uthi bengawazi ama-rights, it's because
Yeah.
i-Bill of Rights akawazi amalungelo akhe. So it is very important for everybody to know i-constitution. And iyatholakala i-constitution as far as I know, especially the Bill of Rights. Um, it just maybe if you can just mention the basic rights like that you have a right to, because some people think I don't have a right.
Okay. You've got a right to education, to access to education. You've got a
Mm,
right to housing. You've got a right, well, to access to adequate housing, access to healthcare, food, water, social security. You've got a right to language and culture, to participate in whatever cultural life of your choice that you want. And also, you've got a right to whatever cultural, religious, and linguistic rights or practices that you want to engage in. You've got a right to access to information, a right to just administrative action. You've got access to court. You've got a right not to be arrested, detained, or accused unlawfully.
mm,
So yeah, it's quite extensive. So, but those are the basics, and importantly, also the rights of children.
mm,
Children have, if you look at Section 28 of the Constitution, it speaks about the rights of children, a right to a name. For instance, most of us I know don't know a right to a name and a nationality from birth, a right to family or parental care, Those things are rights, not just privileges. A right to basic nutrition, shelter, basic healthcare services, and social services. So those
Mm,
are among some of the rights, basic rights that we have.
mm. No, that's good, and for people to know that they have rights to. Now, since we are under a lockdown, at least it could be something. Now, under a lockdown, the president declared a state of emergency.
Yes.
How is the law? Maybe you can, take us through the processes. So the president put us under a state of disaster, which means certain things cannot happen. It's the government who things cannot be argued in parliament, basically. It is the government that has taken control of many things. And then after that, we've seen every time the president will address the nation and then he will say, this is what is happening. And then you hear things are gazetted, which means it's the law. Perhaps can you explain how things function under level three? Because, the government has made it law for people to wear masks whenever they leave their homes. So how can, explain to us what does it mean when things under lockdown, they are pronounced and gazetted? Where do I find myself as a person who think I have rights?
Okay. You see, as much as we all have constitutional rights, there is no right that is absolute. In other words, every right can be limited. And there is a section in the Constitution, Section 36, that speaks about limitations of rights.
Mm,
And it says that the rights in the Bill of Rights may be limited only in terms of law of general application and to the extent that it's reasonable and justifiable in an open and democratic society. So your right can be limited based on consideration of the nature of the right, of the importance of the purpose of the limitation, of the nature and extent of the limitation, and the relation between limitation and the purpose, and also to look at less restrictive means to achieve the purpose. Those things will be considered whenever a right is being limited. Now, it's also important to understand that every right, I have a right, you have a right, but your right should not infringe mine, and mine should not infringe yours.
mm,
So
mm,
that's the first limitation. And then there's a second limitation where then your right will be suspended if it's in the interest of the nation. That
mm,
is not to say that there is no recourse where you're unhappy. Just a few weeks ago, we had a challenge of the level three regulations in court, and the matter was heard. And although the court did not say that the regulations must be done away, government was given time to go back and sit down and look at how the regulations can then be brought in line with the constitutional rights. But basically, your right can be limited. In a state of emergency, your right, when you, the nation is threatened by war, invasion, insurrection, and it is imperative for 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 a state of emergency to be proclaimed, then your right, as you know it and as you have it, will be limited.
mm,
That's the first thing we need to look at. So, COVID lockdown has brought about a limitation of rights. There was a limitation of movement. You could not move as we were used to, or as we are afforded a right by the Constitution. But when you think about it, it's not unreasonable because
mhm,
it's for our protection and our safety that then our rights become limited. And as things change and as statistics get better, then the regulations that have been put in place are relaxed a bit, and our rights then are restored, if I can use the word restored, back to slightly what we are used to.
mm.
But the
Okay.
limitation are basically for our protection.
Yeah. So just to make a follow-up question, because it seems people, I don't know why people are so distrustful of the government, because whenever things are declared, and especially church folk,
Yes.
we are quick to quote the end times. Ukuthi, it's like we it's like we triple six now, you know. I mean, eventually, when you read prophecy, ultimately it's going to be like that. But uh, as a citizen who happens to be a Christian, where do I draw the line to say, okay, the government is protecting me here, or now the government is infringing on my rights? Because, for instance, when the lockdown was called, there was no worship, for instance, and that's when the distrust of people came about. So now, as a citizen, where do I draw the line to say, okay, the government is protecting me here, or the government is infringing on my rights in the state of disaster and so forth?
Um, it goes back to Section 36 that
Mm.
limits your right. Because let me just make an example and try and explain it in a way that would be understandable to a lay person. First of all, you've got a right to assemble, to go and worship, right?
Yes,
But if
yes.
that right endangers um, the whole nation, then the rights of the nation will be considered over your right. It is more important that people stay safe than that they assemble because of the consequences of what happens. A pandemic is not only like a virus. It's worldwide. So the way in which it spreads, first of all, in my view, I think we don't really fully understand COVID-19. At first, it was an issue of it being on surfaces. Now it's airborne. The information keeps changing. But in order to keep the nation safe, individual rights had to be suspended.
Mm,
And every right, as the section says, section 36 says, every right that is limited, that what is being considered is the nature of the right. For example, your right to go and assemble. The importance and the purpose of limitation. It is being limited so that you will not spread COVID and people will stay alive and will not die. The nature and extent of the limitation, you're not limited from gathering or gathering in your own home to worship. No, well, in as far as the numbers are limited, yes, but your right to worship has not been taken away. It's just the issue of assembly. And when you look at the relationship between the limitation and its purpose, there's no there's no ill thought behind it. It's because for the greater good of everybody else combined, including yourself, your right is temporarily suspended or limited.
mm,
So it's not an attack really on your religious right, your right to assemble. It isn't. If it was said that, okay, you will not assemble because, for example, we don't like it, because the government doesn't like the fact that we assemble, it would be a different story. It would be a different story. But now the government is saying you are limited from gathering together for purposes of keeping you safe. It's not only for other people, it's also keeping us safe because when we go and worship, we know what happens. We hug, there's human contact, and it's very difficult to keep us from doing that. So, in order to protect us, the government has said, for now, and it's not a perpetual limitation, it's only up until it is safe to do so. So, the biggest thing for the greater good of the nation, that our rights have been limited. It's not a denial or refusal.
mm. No, no, I agree. I totally
You see,
agree.
so sorry to interrupt you.
Mm,
When you look at whether a right has, if you want to um, look at whether a right is being denied, look at it this way: is it just and is it fair? One, two, does it is it only aimed at particular individuals, particular groups, particular cultures, or it's everybody? In that way, you are able to evaluate. The constitution or the government did not say Seventh Adventists or Zionists or Shembe. They simply said no gathering of any kind, and it extends beyond religious gatherings, even meetings, even funerals, even the things that are important. Gatherings have been limited. As the regulations are being relaxed, of course, there are further requirements that are put in place to keep people safe. So it's
Mm,
not targeted at anybody, it's not targeted at any individual or any group. It's simply for every citizen in order to keep us safe. In that way, you'll be able to objectively see that it's not about a certain group and it's not a violation of a right. It
mm.
is rather a protection.
Yeah, no, that is true. So, which means also, as an active citizen of a country or a resident, it is also imperative for you to enforce that right, so that
Yes.
you protect other people, so that you don't find yourself infringing on the government and finding yourself in holding cells. So it is
Yes.
also important. Now, moving on, because the COVID issue, it's gonna come back again. It's gonna probably someone is gonna ask. So guys, you can ask questions as we are going along so that she can also see them. Now, I want to talk about the issue of marriages, contracts, and the type of marriages that are in South Africa. Of course, you have the customary marriage, and then babizo enyebe ile white wedding that we have. Now, here I meet a 23-year-old or 25 or whatever old. We are madly in love because of what we've been told. Ukuthi, when we get married, we need to marry community of property, or because it means we love each other and trust each other. Now, perhaps you can, and there's a reason I'm asking this question. Perhaps you can explain to us what are types of marriages there are there, and which one is encouraged in our times, because everything has a season in our times, to especially for some of us who are still young and looking to look into, because they make good sense.
Hey, the issue of types of marriages, it's a thorny issue for Christians because whenever you mention the types of marriages, people think, when you think about the different types of marriages except for community of property, then it means you are considering that in future the marriage will end in any way other than death.
Hmm.
And when people are in love, you can't tell them anything because they feel, you know what, if you marry me in community of property, it means you love me. Yeah, but there are other things to consider. The different types of marriages, we have marriage in community of property, where there is one joint estate. So the husband and the wife, they come together and their estates are joined. So there is no issue of this is mine, this is yours. Everything is considered. So when you go to the bank, most of the things that you do, you require your spouse's signature or consent to do them. So when you go to the bank or when you buy property, you will need consent. When you open a specific kind of account, then you will need consent, the consent of your spouse. Now, when you die, then there's only one estate that goes to the surviving spouse, and if there are children, then the children inherit. But that's another issue. That's an issue of the law of succession when you talk about inheritance. But basically, there's one estate in that marriage where two become one. So if I get married in community of property, and I come into the marriage with debts, my debts become the debts of my spouse.
Hmm.
Even if we divorce years later, a third party, when they look at you as a unit, they see you as a unit. So a third party can either claim from me or my spouse, whichever of us owes them, it's not an issue because we are considered one. There is only one joint estate. So if I get married to a man who's got a debt of 1 million rands, it becomes my debt too. I'm also equally responsible for that debt. At a point when he can't pay it, I'm the one who's owing the creditor. So when your creditors come, any creditor can attach the whole estate. You can lose your house, you can lose your car, you can lose everything of yours because everything is yours jointly. Okay. And then the second type of marriage we have is marriage out of community of property with accrual. In this type of marriage, before you get married, you have to sign an antenuptial contract. An antenuptial contract is a contract, is a document where you both state what the value of your estate before you got married. And you are able to then in that document state the things that you would like to be excluded from the joint estate. So if you've got a house and you say, when I get married, this is my house and this is the value I'd like for it to be excluded, it gets excluded. And then what happens is at the end of the marriage, whether it's by divorce or death, you get as a spouse, you get what happens is that the whole estate, both estates are looked at and they look at, okay, at the point of marriage, this is what you had. At the end of the marriage, this is what you had. The estate that shows most growth will share with the other estate half.
Hmm.
So during the marriage, it continues as normal, but at the end of the marriage, then the value of the estate is determined based on the accrual, what each estate has accrued during the subsistence of the marriage. Then we have marriage out of community of property, simply out of community of property, where there are two separate estates, there's none falls into the other. It's just two separate estates throughout the subsistence of the marriage, even after the marriage.
Hmm.
So, it's very difficult to say which type of marriage is recommended these days. The one thing that I always say to people, it's about your financial planning. It's all about planning for your future. For example, if me and my husband get married and I've got businesses that I run, or I'm a director of a company, or I've got I'm participating in activities that can attract creditors and debt, it is prudent to enter into a marriage either out of community of property or out of community with accrual. Because this is what happens. In the event that I cannot pay my debt, then my spouse's estate cannot be attached. I
Hmm.
don't know, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Then
No,
I become solely liable for my debts. But if it's in community of property, if I've got debts that I can't pay, then the whole family suffers. And given these days that a lot of young people are venturing into what you call side hustles, where they've got a salary, but they're also doing other things, or their job is they're entrepreneurs, or it's the kind where yes, they're self employed. In those instances, community of property is not the best way to go. What I would advise young people is consider financial and future planning. Most of the time, unfortunately, when parties come to the table and they intend getting married, not all of them are open about their debts. They're not open about their issues and they're not honest about their way of life. In the different cultures in which we find ourselves, where particularly in patriarchal cultures where the husband considers himself responsible for all the finances, chances of a declaration there or a disclosure regarding debts are very slim. But in the interest of protecting your property, in the interest of protecting the legacy of your children, if you are engaging in businesses, it is not wise to marry in community of property. It has nothing to do with how much you love your spouse. It has nothing to do with whether in future you intend to get married. No. But it's because our financial world has changed. We venture into other things. We want to do other things, taking chances, doing that. So the best way to protect your legacy is to either marry out of community with accrual, or out of prom- in, out of community of property.
Hmm. No, no,
But
just
sorry, before you speak, I wanted to say, as I was saying, I would advise parties go to the bank, get a financial manager, get a life coach, somebody who's able to look at your life holistically. Because when we go for counseling to the pastors, they look at the spiritual part of it, but not really at the financial part of it. So get an expert, somebody who can advise, on what your stance is financially and what would be the best way to go. For lack of being found to have said that people must marry out of community of property. Not planning to incriminate myself here.
yeah. No. What you said a mouthful. And I wanted to follow up on especially the types of marriages, because a few years ago, if not last year or the year before, if not 2018, there was that issue of this guy, the musician, this guy from no, ngilukhohlwe igama lakhe, this guy from Northwest who died. uh he got married into a customary marriage, but then
Yes.
he, I don't know, they separated with his fiance and everything. So how does the law see customary marriage, because there's nothing almost official written down as we know it. You don't go to home affairs or malume, they just get to your house, kuvunyelwane, kukhishwe inkomo. And I know the country recognizes customary marriage. So how does a person, I get somebody, keep amalobolo, but things go wayward. Should we also, especially us who's still gonna get married, have contracts that we write down for, yes, double HP, double HP. Um, is it necessary or unnecessary to say, okay, nglobolile, but things didn't work out, but we should also state what things did not work out? Because it seems good double HP. I didn't follow the case in detail, just that the customary wife came and claimed the estate.
Okay. We do have what is called the Recognition of Customary Marriages Act in South Africa. And in terms of the act, every customary marriage must be registered. So, you see, the act speaks about marriages that were entered into prior to the act being enacted and those that were entered into after the act was enacted. I'm not going to go into those details, but a customary marriage must be registered. There are, of course, there are certain requirements for it to be valid. There are certain things that must be done, but basically it must be registered that it exists. If you are married um, in a civil marriage, and then you take another wife, a second wife, for example, and then it's a customary marriage, that customary marriage has to be registered. And you cannot have a combination of the two, as far as I remember, but that marriage has to be registered.
Mm. Mm. Hi, as Tembe Uguti people, they are listening. I think that's where we will leave it. And
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go
You,
into.
you see, the problem, I think the problem is that most of the time people get into marriages and then they pay lobola and then they live together fat and sad, and then they, at the end of the day, they say they are married. We
Yeah.
do have what the law recognizes: a life partner, somebody who's a life partner. Somebody you're not married but is considered a life partner. Medical aids now register life partners.
Mm-mm.
But that, the question would be, do you now classify that as customary marriage? Because people claim customary marriage when it's time to either claim money or there are issues of the estate. But utoluguti, they had intentions to conclude, because we bantu abamnyama senza njani, we pay lobola and then we conclude a civil marriage. So people will do the lobola thingy and then they stay together and then they never complete it, and then at the end they then say no, it was a customary marriage, but from the very beginning there was no intention. Because where there is intention, you clearly need to register the marriage. Well, you may find that there are instances where maybe one of the spouses dies before it was registered. The court will look at each case on its own merits and consider, the intention of the parties. But for people who intend to just conclude a customary marriage, they just need to register it and not wait until the end and then just claim that it is a customary marriage.
Okay. No, now it makes sense. So we should register everything we do. We shouldn't just assume. Hey, I'm gonna throw you a curveball, and I'm not putting you on the spot. It's a curveball. I just thought of it as you are talking life partners, and it's
Yes.
true. People are they're into life partners more than marriages. Um, I think the idea for me, I heard about it first in England when I was there, where I asked a couple, why aren't they married? They said, no, we don't need a document to recognize us. You know. Anyways, now South Africa, recognizes the same-sex marriages.
Mm.
As it recognizes same. I know this is still a hot topic, especially amongst the Christian community, because we are fundamentally based on the Bible for the most part. And so now here's a couple comes to church, Blessed Hope, or anywhere. They are same sex, they are Adventist, they get married, and or they want to intend to get married, and the church denies them. I know there was a case where people were sued and everything. Is there recourse on the church, as you've mentioned, rights of people, that your rights cannot be infringed? As a religious institution navigating the law, what is the right of the couple? What is the right of the church? Or maybe because it goes specifically to the pastor, what are their rights? Because if you deny Xotiwa, yeah, being a homophobe and everything.
Okay, hang on for this. I just lost you there. Are you saying the couple is a same-sex couple
Yes,
and
yes.
they wish
They
to?
want to be married. Yes, they want to be married by a pastor. You know, they of
Okay,
just for the sake of argument, an Adventist pastor.
yes.
Adventist pastor it says no, because I don't believe it biblically. I cannot do this. So and then they intend to sue. You know, so what are the rights? Because it seems there's a religious right on the side of the pastor. Also, on the same-sex couple, there's also a right that they've been denied. So what are the recourse for both parties? Let me just ask. I don't know if it makes sense, my question.
I understand. I understand what you're asking. You see, the church as an institution has a set of values and fundamental beliefs that it upholds. And those fundamental beliefs that it upholds um, may be considered by somebody who does not subscribe to them as infringing on their right. When the
Mm,
pastor says, I cannot marry you, the pastor is invoking his right to practice his religious beliefs and convictions in terms of the constitution. He is not
mm,
wrong because the pastor does not say, I'm not going to speak to you, I don't like you, because there's no discrimination there. And even in the event of a discrimination, what we look at is it a fair discrimination to begin with? I cannot subscribe to what you believe because it will make you feel like your rights are not being infringed. If I don't believe in, for example, if I don't believe in what example can I make? Okay, I'm lost. I just I lost my train of thought there, and I can't think of an example right now. But the church saying we cannot marry you because we do not recognize same-sex marriages, the church is not infringing on the rights of the parties. The church is invoking what it believes in terms of its rights to cultural practices, beliefs, and convictions. So the couple is going to find it very difficult to have a basis for saying you refused to marry us. The church is not saying we are refusing you to get married, but we are refusing to be a part of the
mm,
ceremony, a part of the whatever partnership you're entering into, because we do not recognize it.
mm.
It
Okay.
has got
No.
to be clear that when we have set as a church, when you hold certain convictions and guidelines that we have and we practice and we can prove we're practicing them, the court will not find us at fault to say that is considered a discrimination, that is considered an infringement on other people's rights, because we are not stopping them from believing what they want to believe. Of course, in the Christian environment, we teach and we encourage a different way of living. We don't believe in same-sex partners, yes. So I've got a right not to believe in same-sex partners, but by saying that, it does not mean that I'm violating somebody else's right, because I also have a right to believe, to my
Mm,
own belief, to my own set of rules. Now the church has certain set of rules. When you join any club, you see, that's one thing that people never think of. If I join the golf club, they will give me a set of rules and say, for you to remain a member of this club, you have to abide by these rules. And at any point when I contravene any of the rights, any of the rules, I'm going to cease to be a member. But when it comes to church, we want to think of it differently. But it's the same. We know what our fundamental beliefs is. We know what the culture of the church is. We know what the church teaches. And by the church enforcing that, it's not infringing on anybody's right.
Hmm. I, I think it is very clear because I was worried about that because it became a hot potato not so long ago. But yeah, I think you've cleared that one out. Now, okay, now going back to there was a curveball. Now, the reason why I asked about in terms of marriages and all that, because we live in this COVID-19 world, and COVID being what it is, it gives you no time for people to plan with regards to death. So, what would you advise people in terms of estates, parents to have with their kids, couples to have with each other regarding estates and everything in the case of a spouse, because these days you take a spouse to or a person to the hospital, they don't come back. So what kind of conversations would you encourage people to have regarding their estate in case things don't go okay?
Estate planning is something that is very important. Unfortunately, amongst us Black people, it's not something that we do a lot. So most Black people die interstate. And the problem is that now, when you die, those who are left behind um, will then have nothing to guide them regarding your wishes of what you wish to happen to your property.
Mm,
It is important to draft a will. It's very important. Unfortunately, it's easy these days because banks draft bills, bastatele umsebenzi, but okay. A lot of people are drafting wills and they are offering that service. Even insurance companies are doing that now because in a will is contained into 80. When in the event that I die, this is what I wish to happen to my property. This is how I wish for it to be shared, or yeah, these are the, because you will nominate beneficiaries, you will nominate the person who will the person who will be in charge of your
execute.
estate, yes, an executor. You will nominate an executor, and then you will decide what happens to your property, and upon your death your wishes will be abided by. Now when you die and there is no will in place, the law of interstate succession takes over. In other words, depending on your marital status, depending on who survives you, then a person who will be an executor of your estate will be appointed according to the law of interstate succession. It becomes a problem where a conflict arises, muntu meseshonile. And we know Black families, we feel ukuthi there's amafa to be shared and everybody wants. And there's strife then that happens, and then there's family wars that happens. And the only thing that will solve that is if there is a will in place. Then the wishes of the deceased are then abided by and effected as contained in a will. But I want to say something that I learned that was very enlightening for me, I think about 4 or 5 years ago. Um, I encourage people to look into financial planning because estate planning goes into financial planning. When you take your insurance, when you plan and you save money, it all goes together, ties together. The type of marriage you will choose, and eventually what happens to your estate. Because even single people can draft a will. It's not only for married people, it's not only for old people. Even young single people can draft a will because then you decide what happens to your property upon your death. So it's very important.
Mm, mm. I No, it is important, because you've mentioned this earlier, and it also goes into the issue of wills, that it's a conversation that as people we need to have, um, because we as Black people are scared of talking about death,
Mm.
and I remember, I think beginning of June, where the government started digging graves, when that memo came from the Ministry of Health, that to municipalities to identify land for graves because we are peaking and so forth. So, and then I realized that there was an uproar for people, The uproar was not in a sense of saying, guys, let's stay more at home. The uproar was saying, why is he digging graves for us? Usesifuna sifile. you know so, and then I realized is that we as Africans, when it comes to death, we don't want to talk about it. It's like we leave a burden for other people behind. So maybe you can emphasize the importance of people, because who wills you leave the estate, go to what happens to it, you list all your properties and everything. Maybe encourage people to say, hey man, death is not a bad thing. Well, it's a bad thing, you know but to talk about it so that you are prepared, it's better looking at what COVID is.
It's true for this. The sad thing about death is that, COVID or not, death is guaranteed. How it's going to happen, we don't know. When it's going to happen, we don't know. It will happen. It's important to live our lives as though the day that you live in is the last day of your life,
Mm,
because then you get to attend to things that we leave for later. We procrastinate doing financial planning, we procrastinate deciding what will happen or what should happen to things that we own, our properties, whatever they may be, movable, immovable, intellectual. We never really think of taking care of those aspects of our lives, and the people who live, who are left behind after we are dead. They are left in a bit of a problem. So I think if we get into the culture, as I said earlier, that estate planning ties in so well with financial planning. And if we learn to do proper financial planning, some of the things will flow into place, because then you get to answer questions you never thought about, and that include what you own, the things that you own, what happens to them, and so forth. You can even in your will state how you want to be buried, who you
mhm,
want to bury you. You can go to town with all the details, because basically a will is a document that captures your wishes to the T. So you can write everything in there, what needs to happen, and it will be given effect. Of course, there are issues where sometimes a will is contested, all those things, but we're not going to go into that, because
yeah.
that's a discussion for another day. But
Mm,
basically, it's very important. I cannot emphasize this enough. The issue
mm.
of drafting a will, making sure that you've decided what happens to your property while you are alive and you have the chance to do so.
No, I think it's important. Just one more last question, and then before, if anybody, because we have just over the hour mark. Um, with the rise of people, they want to go into farming, property owning and everything. How can you advise someone who's venturing into those? What are the fundamental things into property rights? What they should look at, what they should look for, what they should avoid? Because for me as a layperson, I've always been told that property is wealth,
Mhm.
and then now you discover Uguti, and then you hear somebody says, no, property, as long as we are not making money off of it, it doesn't man. That goes for land. So what can you advise someone who says, I want a farm, I want to go into farming, what they should look for, where should they start if they want to, and so forth and stuff like that?
Just a disclaimer before I answer that is not really my area of expertise. But what I can share this evening is that the most important thing for before you do anything is get the correct information, ask questions. And most of the time we don't have the right information, and we make the decisions we do because we do not consult those people who are experts. Firstly, if you want to own a farm, make sure you've got the capital, make sure you've got a plan for it. Because if you own a farm and it's just a farm, it's true, property is wealth if you make money out of it. But the nice thing about property is that property will always appreciate. Of course, appreciate in value. Of course, you've got your rises and falls in your market. Times when it's property values drop and so forth. But generally, you will always make money out of a property, even if you buy it and keep it and then sell it. But have a plan, have a solid plan. Of late, all of us are thinking, me personally, ngicabanga ukuthi, you know what, I think it's time for country living. But but I don't have the resources. I'm not a farm girl. If I get a farm, what am I going to do with it? I must give to people to then plow it for me. So have a plan, have a solid financial plan, what you're going to do. There's no point in doing it because everybody's doing it. Go to the banks, speak to them, connect with people who own farms. Information is power, people. Information is power. Because even in relation to the the constitution, your rights, in relation to financial planning, in relation to marriages, information is power. The more you empower yourself information and get more information, the more likely you are to make a sound decision that you will not regret. So what I would advise, get information from the right people. Sometimes we sit with our friends who know nothing about stuff and we ask them questions and we expect expert answers. No, knock on the right doors, ask the right questions, go to the people, get as much information as you can. Because once you have that information and once you've planned properly, you'll be able to make a sound decision, really.
mm.
You
Ah,
will.
no.
Even with the regulations, the issue of the COVID right now, I know people, what we were talking about earlier. Ask questions, connect with people. The only stupid question is the question that you have not asked.
Mm, mm,
Learn
mm,
to ask a question, learn to seek information, learn to Google, learn to ask people who can assist you. And it will take us a long way. We don't have a culture of reading anymore. We don't have a culture of asking or seeking information. And that is killing us as a black nation.
mm.
We've got
Right.
access to a lot, but we are just not utilizing what we have. So if we can start there, seek for information, be advised professionally, and then take it from there.
Mm. I no, I'm sorted. I'm solid. My last question. Here, just a light question. Now, here's a young girl who will be watching this, or parents who will be encouraging their young girls, ukuthi if they say they wanna venture into law as a profession, what can you advise them? You know, is it looking at the world now we are living in? Because this is
Yes.
a COVID world. A whole lot of things have changed. How we do things in the normal way. Just an example, I was talking to someone and was hey, is it good to go uba umfundisi oba msabat? I said, hey, dude, unless you're gonna be a evangelist, there's nothing here. And
Yes.
worse, after COVID, there's nothing for anyone anymore. So,
Mm.
what would you advise a young girl, young lady, or maybe there's a professional who wants to go into law? What would you advise them in this world we are living in as maybe a parting shot? Maybe Kona Abba who wants to ask question.
Okay. I would say, come. The world is your oyster. The legal fraternity is saturated, let me be honest with you. But the biggest problem is that when people think of going into law, they've got a limited understanding of what you can do when you've got a qualification in law. A lot of people think, okay, I'm going to go to court and that's it. But there is a lot within the legal environment that you can do. You can be a compliance officer, you can practice in various fields and aspects of the law, honestly. But it's just that understand, if you want to go into law, decide what is it actually that you want to do and what inspires you to go into law. Personally, I enjoyed it. Personally, the one thing that I love about my work or my work environment, my profession, is the fact that you never stop learning and
Mm,
that the law moves and changes with society. you know the idea of doing research on a question of law that is difficult and eventually finding the answer is the most exciting thing for me. So
mm,
if you love knowledge, if you love reading, if you love thinking critically about issues, if you love being able to articulate what you're thinking to apply the law, then do it. Don't just do it because somebody else likes it. You've got to really love it because it's not easy. I've met people who've said, "Hi, Bo, how did you guys do it?" Because law is very difficult. You've got to enjoy it, and when you enjoy it, it will be a breeze. Okay, maybe not always. Okay, it wasn't always easy, but you will enjoy it and you will enjoy. Yeah, but decide
mm,
what it is in the future you want to do. Do you want to become a practicing attorney? You can be a non-practicing attorney. You can go and become the secretary of a company. There's a lot that you can do. You can work with trusts and wills. You can work with investments. You can work with in insolvency, administration of companies. Decide. And once you are done, once you're qualified, pick a specialty. That helps. Most attorneys, they specialize in something. Yes, we can all do everything, because we are working, not a working library, but we know where to find stuff. But
Mm,
when you do it, have a plan, have a solid plan, and follow it through. And again, seek information. Our view of the law in at work club, it's a very restricted and limited, but there's so much you can do. And for the group that you're speaking with now, if anybody needs help, but wait to please contact me. Minimum sebenzi means nothing if I can't help my fellow brothers and sisters. Even if I don't have information, I will connect you with somebody who has information, because that's why we are here, to be able to
mm.
help one another. Please don't hesitate to give me a ring. Don't hesitate to ask, WhatsApp, whatever. But seek information. The more information you find, the more you'll be able to carve out a path for yourself where you want to go. The more you are likely to find your own niche and stick to that and do what you like. Now, you ask Mfundisi ukuthi in these times, umthetho has a wide area of practice, because you've got your contract, you've got your litigation. You can even litigate in contracts. You've got criminal law, you've got public law, you've got administrative law. So there are many aspects of the law in which you can practice. You've got legislative drafting. You can do a lot. So as much as the legal fraternity is saturated, there's still a lot more space for more people who would want to study law.
I I think now I maybe I should go into law, you know.
And there are
um,
other areas of the law that have not been explored much.
yes.
Yes,
Mm,
like your environment, your water, what is it called? Marine law. There are many aspects of the law that have not been explored, that you still need people there. So there's still a lot that can and should and will be done. So
mm.
anybody who wants to do law, come join us. It's exciting. We love it. If you don't do it for the money, you do it for the job. Of course, you want the money as well, but yeah.
Of course. How much? The voice is an invoice. Um, yes. No, thank you so much, Lesego. Oh, by the way, people, as you said, information. Illegal aid is always there for people who don't have money. If they need a lawyer, legal aid is the closest place to go and look for help. But as
Yes,
you've mentioned, they should talk to you, see what you can help them with, because information is power.
yes.
Anyway, thank you so much, Lesego, for coming through. I don't know if anybody has a question or wants to ask. We have a few minutes, but abazalwane bethu basasaba. I don't know what they are scared of. But the good thing about it, because we have these things on YouTube, so you can keep on watching, because sometimes information might figure you're still thinking, and it will get you out
Yes,
later.
yes.
Yeah.
There's,
So
there's,
no,
there's a
thank.
whole lot more. I'm sorry to interrupt him, Fundisi. Thank you for inviting. It was more than a pleasure. There's a whole lot more to explore regarding the law, regarding aspects of the law and questions in law. I know we only had a limited time, so we could only address certain aspects, but there's a whole lot more to unpack. And on the issue of those who want to study the law, ngikhula mina kwakuthiwa ufuna uba ummeli, you want to go lie, oqamba amanga enkantolo. And my grandfather used to say to me, iBhayibheli lithi, we've got an advocate who is Christ, who speaks on our behalf. And I know ukuthi there are issues of integrity and ethics that become a problem, particularly for Christians. I would like for us someday to just touch on that. Ngabantu abaningi banqena ukwenza umthetho because they think when you are a lawyer, it means you're going to learn how to lie, become an
Mm,
expert in lying. They think you have to have a particular kind of personality. So they
mm.
keep themselves because they think if I'm not outspoken and I'm shy, it means I can't study the law. No, no, no. There are no limits. There are no limits. And when we have time, we can talk about that, and how how Christianity and being in the legal fraternity goes hand in hand, particularly
Mm.
in dealing with criminals and the justice. I think that's an important discussion that when we have time we can have, because
No,
it's a
I think
barrier for most people to study the law.
yeah. No,
Mhm.
actually, I was just thinking about it because I think it's important that with Christianity, law is a maligned profession. Go by law, go by army, go by law enforcement, police. It's like you cannot even say you want to be a cop nowadays, Poisa, because it's a maligned profession. So I
True.
think we'll find time and then we'll talk about these things and how can you be a Christian and still be in the law fraternity and
Yes,
still
yes.
serve.
True. I've
Mm,
had people who've said to me, "What? Oh, Melly, no, you can't be."
mm.
Um, and I've said, "Yeah, yeah, yes, I am." And they're like, "No, why? You don't seem too arrogant, too." Apparently, sitisikhayijwa ngalezo zinto, but hey, be that as it may, we'll unravel that one of these days.
Yeah, no, definitely. We look in. We will talk, and then we'll see where we put it, so that because the law for me it fascinates me, the whole law aspect. It's a very good fascination, and I think all of us need to know our rights. We need to
Mm,
know
true.
many things. As you've mentioned, knowledge is power, and when you have knowledge, you have power. Nobody can move you when you
Mm.
know your rights. So yes, yeah, if you want to have a final word, the floor is yours.
I wanted to say, in addition to a conversation about how you can be in the legal profession and still be a Christian, the next question would be how the law will affect us in the end times. Because you see, now during COVID, the suspension of our rights is just an example of how, as much as we have rights that are being protected, of how it will be so easy to just turn things like that. Because right now we've got I know I didn't touch on the issue of how the president can now make regulations. The state of emergency allows him to do that during the state of emergency, to come up with regulations, to manage the situation. But we'll need to talk about how the change of the law will affect our rights as time goes by, how the liberality of our constitution will affect our religious rights in future. We've recently seen there's a Church of Satan that
Yes.
was launched. Yes, they are well within their rights because they are practicing their rights to their religious and cultural belief. So to have
Mhm.
to have that conversation that will allow us to, when we see things changing, to not be afraid, but to understand where we are going, the movement, how things are going to change, and how we should react to that, and how we can get ready for such changes.
No, I think we will have that conversation soon. We'll shift things around. We need to have you back. We need to talk about spirituality and the law, and then so many things actually we can talk about, and we need
Yes.
to talk about, because we need to talk about things that will affect us. You know. So yeah, no, thank you so much, Lesego. Thank you for coming through. I know you just got home. Yeah, so thank you for coming through. Thank you for joining us, for being part of this online ministry. May God bless you in your new work as you are also navigating life. Um, but it's good that you are with your people. We are still your people as well, you
Of
know.
course, you always will be. You always will be. And I'm so glad. Thank you for the invite. It was more than a pleasure anytime. And as soon as I get a chance, as soon as they say interprovincial, uh, I'll be the
It
first to
can
come around
happen
and say,
now.
hi,
Yeah,
guys.
it can happen now. But
Yes.
the thing is, you'll
I get to
find us at
imagine,
home.
yes, you're not assembling it. So I'll have to visit each of your homes and might just spread corona in the
Yeah.
process. So in order for us to, sort of curb that, I will wait until there's some assembling going on.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
definitely, definitely. So, Babugeli, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Lesego, for
Thank
always
you.
being
God
always
bless.
being open to minister to us. Guys, on Thursday we are going to start a new series of, it's called the Season of Consolidation. You can have your reading in Jeremiah 31. We will be talking on that book for the whole month of August. Jeremiah 31, the season of consolidation, because after this COVID, we will have to count our losses. And the Bible has prepared us on how to count our losses. So we're going to talk about the season of consolidation. And then on Friday, the poster that appeared, that we are going to be talking about the communion service. We will have at the end of August, because most of us, I know I celebrated the Passover sometime in April, but most of us have not had a communion service, and we are going to have a virtual communal service. But before we get there, before you say I'm a heretic, we will talk about it so that we prepare you for that. So our Friday services, starting this Friday, we will have different speakers who will talk about the communal service. What did Christ mean? Where did it start from? What did he mean when he say, do this in remembrance of me? So every Friday, Sabbath opening services, we will have a lesson. And then on the 28th of August, we will have our communal services at home. We're not going to meet. You're going to have it at home with your families. But until we get there, we will build up on that topic. So August is going to be exciting. On Tuesdays, it's going to be women lifting us up. Thursday, we're going to talk about consolidation, the season of consolidation. On Friday, we're going to learn about the communal service. Communal service, I love that topic because it is one aspect that tells us that Jesus is coming. That's why he says, do this in remembrance of me. So guys, join us on Thursday and then on Friday. Again, thank you, Lesego, for coming through. God bless you. Usikhonzele kunoma and the whole fam. Thank you, Usbongele, for borrowing us for this couple of hours, I think 90 minutes. May God bless you and take care. Good night, everybody.
Hopefully, say
Bye-bye.
bless you all, and yeah, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.